Greetings and welcome to Beasties and Baddies. This is a special series that I'm doing that's going to be going into the freaks and monsters of Gotham City, and a excellent source of information and camaraderie is our buddy Johnny Sorenson. You may know him from his Batfan on Batman series, or from his time hanging out with our buddy Boba Hicks doing the Boba Joe show. And I'm glad he is here, coming from the other side of the friggin' world. How you doing, buddy?
Time zones suck.
I know, but it's good to be with you. It's been a while.
Oh, it has been a while, man. No more writing this month, hopefully.
Well, you and I both are fans of Beasties and Baddies, monsters and cryptids and whatnot, and also enjoy some of the lesser known Bat villains. I wanted to do a series of some of the Gotham rogues because there's so many and they're so interesting, but I don't want to do the typical Catwoman, Penguin, Joker. Everybody does those.
Yeah.
I wanted to focus on some of the more obscure or less known. And I thought a good place to start with that would be looking at some of the works by Matt Wagner, who did a couple of really good comics. What was that, back in the early 90s, I want to say, when those came out?
I forget the actual. Let's post 2000. But he's done one-off stuff. I think, like little contributed guest issues and stuff in the 90s, as a lot of guest writers and artists did. But the specials that got collected into little trades, little short stories of 4 to 6 issues, sort of mini series, really. Post to early 2000s, they did a bunch of them. Yeah.
The time or dates kind of get away from me after a while, but
it gets fuzzy in my head. I've got Wikipedia next to me so I can look at the actual year. I forget the years. I think, I got that yesterday. I'm like, no, I got that 20 years ago.
Exactly. But Johnny was kind enough to put together some slides for us. So
if it involves Batman, I can do that in my sleep.
Oh yeah. So we've got some cool stuff to go through here. If you're not familiar with the work of Matt Wagner, he did a couple of different stories in the early career of Batman. I'd say after year one, but still before, um, somewhere between year one and year three.
Yeah,
It's solo adventures. There's no sidekick. There's no supervillains. It's the early Bat dealing with the seedy underworld of Gotham, and he takes some interesting twists, as we see here with these two sets of stories that we're going to go over today: Batman and the Monster Men, which was a short series, and then he did a follow up to that called Batman and the Mad Monk, and both of those are excellent. Both the artwork, the storytelling. Um, they're just favorites of mine as far as Batman stories. I like his early career stuff. Some people do it well, some it's a little ham-handed, but I think Matt Wagner handled it really well. What drew you to the Matt Wagner stories? Did you just pick them up at the comic
um,
shop and
well, I mean, when I first read them, I couldn't tell you when, but most likely I read them at the public library or something like that, because I used to go in all the libraries around Perth. This is like 20 years ago when I'd moved from New Zealand. And before I was going to the comic shop, I was going to the libraries and reading any trades they had. I read a lot of DC Vertigo stuff and Sandman and that sort of thing. Grant Morrison's Invisibles.
oh yeah.
Anything Batman, of course, whatever it was, whether it was trades of 90s stuff or just one-off miniseries. That's likely where I first read it, and I probably didn't own it till 5 or 10 years later. But definitely when I picked them up, this is back when comics were more affordable. They're very crazy expensive now, even to buy older trades or even new editions of trades at reprint.
That's
But
true.
I've moved so much in my life. Like I don't know, I've moved no less than 20 times in 30 years. Uh, but I'm not going anywhere now. I've been in the same place for at least 11 years. And every time I've moved, I do a culling. I've gotten rid of stuff. I've obviously accumulated a hell of a lot of things, like the toys behind me in recent years. Before that, I had not even like this much toys, and I had hundreds of issues of Spider-Man they bought in the 90s. They were fairly terrible, but as a kid, and I bought them and enjoyed them. I just gave them away when I moved, and I've given away big hard covers and soft covers of the Punisher and other stuff, because when you move, it's expensive. And are you going
Yes.
to pay the weight to ship heavy big books interstate, or are you just going to give them away and just buy them again if you really want them down the track? So that's what I did. Got rid of a heap of comics and stuff. And when I was kind of rebuilding my comic collection, I thought, well, if I'm only going to fill one or two little sections in a shelf and not a whole library, what am I going to put in there? And I'm like, I'm going to put some Matt Wagner Batman, because it's like the distilled essential elements of like the archetypal Batman that's in there, and that you can build into bigger stories or build into movies or franchises or video games in the same way Batman animated is one of the best modern versions or adaptations, where you get the kind of best of all these decades of stories but turn into something that's kind of simple and refined that anyone can pick up without having to be bogged down in decades of continuity
Yes.
with other crossovers and other bullshit.
That is definitely something with the Matt Wagner stories, and we talked about Darwin Cook earlier. Is another writer
Yeah.
that was really good.
Also, Mignola's Hellboy is similar and
Mhm.
similar gothic style content, and you can pick up and read just about any Hellboy story and not really need to read the previous issues, because it's like watching season one of the X-Files. They're just early self-contained stories without all the nonsense.
Yeah, that's fair. Well, one of the things I liked about what Wagner did is he actually went back to early Batman stories and
Yeah, it's
picked
cool.
um, early prototype villains that were lesser known
It was
and
kind of
really
one and done at the time.
absolutely very much villain of the week kind of stuff. So with both the Monster Men and the Mad Monk, they had appeared in the 30s and 40s in previous issues of Detective and Batman, as you can see here. And they were just, typical baddies of the time. They were
Yeah.
very two-dimensional. They weren't really fleshed out in the story. It was either, mad scientists or crazy occult stuff. And this was really in the era before he got into his more well-known supervillains. These
Yeah,
were
this is
just
this is pulp
mostly
era stuff.
absolutely. So he takes that and runs with it and does quite well. So we'll start with the Monster Men first. This is something I wasn't aware of. I've read a lot of Burroughs, especially his Tarzan and the the center of the earth kind of stuff. What was it? I can't pronounce it. Politicular. He had a fancy name for basically the center of the earth. The Jules Verne type stuff. But this is a series that he did called The Monster Men, and it was in that same time period, actually a little earlier. This was 1913 it was first put together, but all through the 20s and 30s there were a lot of these type of stories of mad scientists tinkering with creating minions. And
like in Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. And
yes, yeah, definitely some very some parallels.
I just looked up that word because I
thank you.
I just looked it up. So I was trying to figure out what it was.
It just wouldn't come to mind, but yeah, I like those. This I'm going to have to read. I have not read these, but I like
so you
the
got like
idea
a short story, and then you've got obviously a lot later on. There's some comics adaptations and stuff, but because basically it's like I don't know, like you Steamboat Willie now, like it's been in public domain, so people can do unofficial adaptations and whatnot.
So I don't know if Wagner was directly inspired by this or
I think he just used the title mainly, but like other than the general elements of a mad scientist creating like weird monstery men, or
Yeah. So if you are interested in monster men, Edgar Rice Burroughs has some stuff out there you might want to check out. This is, like I said, something that I wasn't aware of before, and thank you, Johnny, for bringing that to my attention. With Batman and the Mad Monk, which we'll get into more in a minute, it was another limited series that he did. Again, it goes back to that year one-ish continuity. It's early Batman. He's still figuring out his craft. He's building the mythos. And
he's inexperienced. He's still a little bit green, even though he's been out there for a while. But he's not seen and done everything. He's not flying around in space with jetpacks or none of that. He's encountering new things all the time that he's never seen before.
Exactly. There's a picture of Matt and his favorite writing partner, his feline. And he did the artwork and the story for both Monster Men and Mad
like a lot of your Japanese manga artists and what they do, they're both the writing and the stories, which is not very typical in American stuff because you don't have the time for one thing. But
true.
But the whole formula of comics has always usually been the writer and artist. But that's another thing about his work is that he's doing the writing and the art, but he's taking his time. He's not rushing out some monthly thing. This is something he's probably did about a year, I would imagine, to do some of these, get this story together. And because everything about it's crafted really well and it's not rushed and it's not trying to get to some, MacGyver's hanging off the end of the cliff and his fingertip and what's going to happen next episode and there's none of that, like none of that serialized stuff trying to push you into buying the next monthly issue.
And I think one of the advantages to having the artist and writer be the same person is it really lends itself to a better overall theme. He's obviously drawing to the story that he's written. He knows exactly how the character should look, what kind of drama he should be putting into the visual part of the storytelling. And his artwork,
even that image there, like the Mad Monk, and not giving away the story yet because we haven't got into it, but his skin tone and the very pointy nails are giving you little hints there about the actual story.
Right. Little subtle bits. But Wagner's done a lot of stuff with some classic DC characters.
That Trinity book one was fun too. That was similar to the Darwin Cook New Frontier sort of thing, except it's just about Batman, Superman, Wonder Woman. It's meant to be like their first official meeting in the universe, and that one's
Right.
quite good.
And again, he has a really good grasp on golden age or early career Batman, and
Like the
having
Superman's
him,
very Fleischer looking in his book.
yes, and his take on Ra's al Ghul and Bizarro, I thought was really well done as well.
Yeah, I like the Bizarro.
We might touch on that another time. One of Wagner's original characters is a character named Grendel. And
that's he's done the most with that as far as actual volumes of comics, and I don't know, many years he's worked on that character.
Yeah, he definitely honed his craft with that character and working to build his art style. And there's even been a Batman
like panels
Grendel.
and cinematic style and all that. And
oh yeah, I see a lot of Will Eisner influence in the way he does his visual storytelling.
Yes,
you know, he sets up his panels to be, well, it's not so much panels, but just actual, you're pulled into the art, and it pulls the story along where you don't even realize where the panels begin or end. It just flows.
Yeah, it's very cinematic, like a film camera, but except panels are more than comics. But you're right, it pulls you in, and you're not aware of it, and there's no. I mean, you're not going to see any Rob Liefeld X-Men nonsense in there, or gimmicks, or if there's a splash page, it's there for a reason. It's not there just to go, oh, look at me, I'm a fancy artist. Everything there is to make the story flow and move along. There's nothing wasted in there.
Exactly. So there is a Batman Grendel crossover. We might cover that at some point, but
it's quite fun. It's short.
Oh, yeah.
Like you can read it in like probably half an hour or so. It's quite fun though.
But for today, let's delve into Monster Men. Again, I love the artwork in this. Everything is really well done. It's got
the covers are great.
Oh yeah, and just the mood that it sets. Gotham is very.
You can also see a little bit of the Well, I mean, part of it's the influence of those early Batman stories, but we had the Frank Miller Year One with was it David Mazzucchelli did the artwork, and used a lot of red and kind of brown sepia tones. We can see some of that brown sepia tones, like your 40s, 50s, and your gothic films and crime stuff, and so some of that kind of like simpler color palette, and not kind of blinding you with like I don't know, Spider-Man colors or whatever.
Exactly. I also like the physique that he gives Batman. He makes him smaller, more athletic. He's not muscle bound, but he's certainly fit. And you can tell he's a young man who's new to this game and still making his way. Just really well done. I can't say enough good things about his art, but let's get into the story. One of the reasons we picked this is because it does deal with some of his more obscure villains. In this case, he has his first dealings with Hugo Strange, who has been done a couple of different ways in the comics, but his take on him in the Monster Men, I think, is really different from how we've seen him in other ways. He's obviously, extremely intelligent, very arrogant. That's typical of Hugo Strange and other portrayals. How would you say that this Hugo Strange differs from some of the other ways he's shown up in other media in recent years?
It's a tricky one because, like you said, he's kind of been sort of reinterpreted over the years, and here he's not really so much the supervillain as the kind of mad scientist, early Lex Luthor type, and like the story is called Batman the Monster Man. It's not called Batman Hugo Strange. So the focus is on the things he's creating, but we do see he's this very intelligent, weird boffin. But it's very pulp style. He's not becoming the supervillain that we know him as later on. Which different stories. Some of those 70s ones with like I forget. I can't think of the name of the dudes.
Neil Adams.
No, the other guys that did just a little bit was like Alan Grant and another couple of guys that worked with them in the 70s. Did some Hugo Strange ones and Joker stuff where they got more into the psychology of the character rather than just the antics or villainy. So there's there's a bit of that in there, but he's not yet the supervillain type who's overpowering, or he's not going to physically beat Batman or anything like that.
Yeah. In some of the more classic Hugo Strange stories, especially the ones from the Detective Comics of the 70s, he was much more about being, a psychologist, trying to
Yeah, that's it.
understand
Yes,
the
Marshall Rogers. That's
psychology.
what's the.
Ah, yes. Looking at the
I think.
psychology of the bat and what makes him tick. In this one, he's more straight mad scientist.
Yeah.
And as you can see, he's working on mutations and trying to tinker with human DNA. And these are some of the results of his labors that, as you can see,
Quite hideous.
Batman is, very much unprepared for. The scale that he uses, where he shows how much larger these characters are compared to Batman, it makes him look like he's in some serious peril compared
Yeah, it looks
to,
like he's a little action figure.
I know. It's good use of scale, I think. And
Yeah,
they're
like
really
these guys are just hideous and grotesque, and they're they're super strong. Not Hulk strong, but they're by normal human being standards. They're super strong, without being a metahuman. But they're also kind of mindless cannibals, so it's very scary.
oh yeah. And at this point in his career, he's been dealing with street crime, he's been dealing with mobsters. He's never dealt with anything supernatural or,
Mm.
super science for
Most
that matter.
most of the guys he's run into so far are trying to shoot him or punch him. They don't try and eat him.
Right. So this is quite a different type of villain that he has to learn tactics to deal with.
Yeah.
That he gets caught flat-footed at first. He's not prepared, and I
Yeah, that's
like the
one of the
fact.
things that Matt Wagner does really well. Actually, is he shows that Batman will wade into situations where he's unprepared and doesn't know what's happening, just get his ass kicked. I love a good story where Batman just gets beat to hell and has to go away and lick his wounds and hide away in the cave. And has to come up with a new strategy or plan or how to do it.
Yeah, the later, more seasoned Batman has a contingency plan for everything. At this point in
Yeah,
his career, he's still working it out, and he does get trounced a bit. Here's some more great artwork with Hugo and one of his assistants in the lab, and you just see the whole very 40s pulp kind of style to
yes,
his laboratory, and all the detail is there. The cinematography, like we say, showing the shadows of the hands, but not actually showing the violence. It's very much like classic black and white monster movies.
yes.
It's just well done. I enjoy it. And you can see the way he lays out the panels. Like I said, it flows very well. Sometimes he'll alleviate the panels altogether and just go through, splash page type stuff, but it's done in a way that moves the story along and draws you in.
Yeah, I love that those hands coming at you because it's like you're getting perspective of the monsters or the camera or whatever. Looks great.
Oh, absolutely. And, I don't think at this point in the story, Hugo, he knew what he was trying to achieve. He's going for some sort of a super, uh, you know,
Well, it's like an
su-
Ubermensch, but a like the
Ubermensch.
original
That's the word.
version before Superman existed, and the old short stories that Siegel and Schuster were riffing on.
Excuse me. Exactly. He's trying to perfect humanity, and it goes horribly awry, as it
Hmm.
often does in mad scientist
And
tales.
it's kind of getting into and I won't go into the nasty stuff, other things of that era, but it's kind of getting into like genetics and eugenics and stuff like that. Because like, what's his ultimate goal? It's nothing good.
Right. And he does do a good job of fleshing out the the the, the mindset of Hugo Strange. He goes into some
Yeah,
of the, like we say here, the psychological complexities of the characters, both what Bruce and Batman are going through, as well as the villain, and seeing where they're trying to come from as far as their mindset. Of course,
yeah.
Hugo, in his mind, he's not a villain. He's trying to push
No, he's not.
humanity forward.
Like
But
his Luthor type. He's not. He doesn't. And in his mind, he's not a villain.
exactly. But he does send his new minions out to do some errands for him, and of course that causes the Bat to investigate, and chaos ensues. And there are some graphic bits to it, but I think it's tastefully done compared to some other
Yeah.
comics. It's not just gore for gore's sake. It's
No.
showing the horrific nature of these things that he can't reason with. He can't, try to tactically outmaneuver at first. It's just he's up against brute strength with no conscience.
Yeah. Exactly. Actually, this scene is not unlike. I was just playing a Mad Max video game before we were talking, and I was literally exploding guys with gas tanks and exploding javelins, and it was just like this body parts going everywhere.
Yeah, and he's the unpreparedness of Batman when he first meets these things. I really think that was well done. It
Yeah,
shows.
that's one of the things I love about the Matt Wagner stories is he does that so well.
Yeah, he was definitely not prepared to walk in on this, and
no way.
It's
like another bloody, like a serial killer or something. It's just like how could you possibly prepare if you don't know and never encountered anything like it before?
And you definitely get the feeling with these stories that Batman is saying, I've seen the worst Gotham can hand me. He's like, nope, no, you haven't. It gets
not yet.
And we also get to see the aspects of him as a true vigilante. He is hunted by the police in this. They are not his friends.
And they're not even sure who he is yet, whether he really exists. Like, he's just a kind of urban legend and that.
Exactly. I mean, he's got, they only have, brief descriptions from a few eyewitnesses and what the criminals that he's captured have said about him, but they've never actually seen him much. He stays to the shadows.
Goliath and gargoyles.
That's it. Is he a monster himself? They don't know. They don't know what they're dealing with. But there have been some other more modern takes on monster men in comics. I wouldn't
they were
say
just ripping on that story. Like it was kind of like nothing great, but they went like the it's like kind of like Resident Evil style, where you got like the virus or the thing that mutates them into the monster man went citywide in one of the modern stories. So it was just an excuse for them to have a whole bunch of different monsters.
Yeah, so they just basically touch on the idea that this came from a previous story and then kind of ran with it and went to absurdity with like building size monsters, as you can see. But
yeah, they had one kaiju.
Yeah, not quite as. Yeah, it's a fun romp, but not as well done as what.
Wagner no way! The story was like kind of meh. It was just fun to see some other monsters.
Absolutely. So that's in a nutshell. That's Batman and the Monster Men. It's a great series. I recommend it. I think you can find it as a graphic novel with the whole series.
Yeah, it's like a little collected edition. That's one of the more affordable ones because it's not too long. Or you can even find like secondhand ones on eBay sometimes, or like if you're in the US, like at a comic show or something.
Yeah, and I think it's also available through Comixology if you want a digital.
Oh yeah, digital. I forget this digital stuff exists sometimes. I mean, I do read them, but I forget it because I read them and I forget they exist because they're gone.
If they were going to look for some source material to do more DC animation, I think these stories.
I'm surprised they haven't gone to one of these. To be honest, I mean, they've done a whole bunch of like Frank Miller ones and a bunch of other influential guys from some of the areas, and I'm really surprised they haven't done one of these.
Absolutely, because they are good standalone stories, and they don't have to be in any particular continuity. They're just good Batman tales.
There's a chance we might see in this bloody animated series that was supposed to come out 2 or 3 years ago that like Bruce Timm and whatever's going back and doing they're doing a new Batman animated like your 90s one, but they're actually going back to this style to the early years. So maybe they will do some of the stories in their all variations of them.
That would be awesome. We'll have to hope that DC Animation doesn't, mess that up. Some of their stuff.
Yeah, well, it's meant to be an ongoing like series, but it'll probably be short when it comes out because it's been delayed already. It's probably since COVID times it's been delayed.
Yeah, and then they lost their whole DC Universe streaming thing, and then it went to Max.
Yeah,
DC
all sorts of shenanigans.
Yeah, it's weird to see what's going on. I miss the days of simple, direct to video or physical copy releases.
Yeah. I just remember when they announced it several years ago, they were doing this other animated series. I went, oh, who cares? It'll be another stupid Batman thing. And they went, oh, no, they're actually getting some of the people from Batman Animated involved in it. And the teaser image was basically very much like that cover up there where it's him over the castle and he's got the pointy ears. But it was the 1940s, slightly askew, different angled ears and slightly different shape. And it was very deliberate. I'm like, oh, well, that's 3940 Batman. It's not modern Batman, so it was very deliberate in that teaser image they showed.
Well, I hope they pursue that because I think that's an interesting era of the
And
Batman.
it's meant to be an adult show, not an all ages show.
Okay, well, we'll keep an eye on that, and definitely the Mad Monk follows in that same mindset. It is a very adult
Yeah,
tale.
they're both from those early stories, and it does directly chronologically follow on from the other one.
I would say, I think Matt Wagner was looking at the Mad Monk as a way to show what the proto supervillain would look like.
Yeah.
You know, this was one of the first. He's not so much a costumed criminal. He's more of he deals with the occult. He's the leader of a group. It's much more psychological, and he's got some depth to him. And he's
it reminds me of like the 70s and all the bloody satanic panic and all that sort of thing, and cults and.
Yeah, and that was a part of the 40s as well. There was a lot of occultism that was part of
supernatural stuff and cult stuff way back in the early part of the century.
Absolutely. And then, of course,
mediums
over the years,
and...
the stories of people like H.P. Lovecraft, his Cthulhian mythos, and those who followed in his style were very popular. And I think this it's not Cthulhian, but it does touch on that same Gothic horror. Or
it's definitely Gothic horror.
Yeah, not so much the cosmic, but again, great artwork. The covers are beautifully done, and the art inside.
And the one that says #1 in front of the castle is very well known early. I forget it was Detective or Batman. It was one of the very early known covers. That also Neil Adams did a version of that, was quite famous too. So that's been covered a few times, that particular image from the old comics.
And I think Wagner does it really well. Again, very, very cinematography styled in the way that he does his layouts. The Mad Monk is a cult leader, and I don't think we'd seen Batman at this point in his career deal with something like this. People who are just blind fanatics following someone. So he's trying to understand, what this villain is. He's not just some gangster. He's something else.
Yeah. And it kind of plays on those things where, like in real life cults, where with the leader is promising the acolytes basically something impossible that they can't get, and it's got a psychological hold over them, but also hinting at he might be something more than human, but we don't really know at the start of the story.
We do see something similar to this in Batman the Animated Series. Bruce Timm did have some occult type characters that he tried to bring in a more kid-friendly way. He certainly had restrictions because it was a Saturday morning cartoon at first, and but I saw some similarities with some of the characters in the first 1 or 2 seasons of Batman the Animated Series, where he had
I got to rewatch all that show this year. I finally managed to pick it up on Blu-ray last year, the first time, because it actually came out in Australia several years after it was on Blu-ray in America. I mean, I've got crappy digital versions, but I wanted the Blu-ray to watch on the TV in the lounge,
Oh, absolutely, and they're just awesome. Even if you just have them on in the background, they're just fun.
Yeah.
And this reminds me a lot of the Bruce Timm atmosphere for Gotham. The way that he would kind of have that Art Deco style, like you say, the heavy shading, the different use of colors, a lot of oranges, a lot of sepia, and it sets the mood really well. So we have
it's very distinctly going for that 40s era, like comics and film. It's not your modern bloody day glow neon comics of the 90s and 2000.
Right. And we see here that they're having occult ceremonies. There are victims that are sacrificed. It's creepy. And,
Yeah.
of course, as people go missing, the Bat investigates. This is one of my favorite scenes. I
Yeah.
love just there's a lot of atmosphere. It's well done.
Fog.
Absolutely. And again, you see, lack of use of panels. It's technically a splash page, as you would say, but it's really
But it's
setting
not
a
your
great
typical
scene.
splash page. Like,
No. Yeah. The architecture does play a part in the storytelling as it would in classic cinema. And he really
well, you
does.
just look at you got the pointy roofs, then you got like I'm assuming they're pine trees or something in the front, the same shapes and that, and you got fog and the big bridge. You got foreground and background. Like you walk it as like in this big establishing shot in some Hammer horror film, and you're going to get drawn in, and what's hiding around the corner, and it could be anything.
Yeah, I could definitely see some Hammer horror parallels with the way the story's put together. And just the use of just the blood red in the background here, the lighting. He's definitely interrogating a suspect quite thoroughly. So he's investigating
Just
this
gently
mysterious,
with kindness.
exactly, with extreme intensity. Yes. So as he learns about this brotherhood, he's trying to figure out what's going on. He's taking out some low-level thugs that may have a little bit of information.
He's probably got a head injury, I would think, after that.
Yeah. So, Batman comes to the story looking at this as just another, typical, confidence man, con man kind of thing, and not realizing that he's dealing with the occult or the supernatural, which is something it's new to him. I don't know how much in his training he touched on that, but he definitely gets a crash course in dealing with the Mad Monk.
Yeah, well, in these earlier stories, it is the first time he's dealing with anything supernatural, which he doesn't particularly believe in because he's never encountered it, despite dressing as a supernatural creature. But that's all, it's all a parlor trick in Batman.
Yeah, he's just working on the psychology of criminals. He's not really taking himself seriously in that, but he runs up against some things he just can't explain. And
so he assumes someone like Mad Monk's doing the same thing, that he's trying to trick people, which he is, but he's doing other things as well.
Right. And, as the story progresses, you realize it's like, no, there's something more to it. It's not just, theatrics. It's something supernatural.
And that lady there, I think, was meant to be Julie Madison from the first years too, from the Batman stories.
Right. She was one of the early characters that I think she was at least, a semi-love interest of Bruce Wayne.
Girl.
Yeah. Someone who
rich families and all that. And before you had Vicky Vale and Selena Connolly, Julie Madison was one of the earlier kind of love interests.
Yeah, and I think this was handled well. He has a vested interest because he knows this person in both of his personas.
And you don't need to know that, sir, but it's just kind of there for people that are fans of the stories.
Yeah. Again, great action scenes and the moods that it sets. We see him crafting some new weaponry. This is the first time we see him using the silver batarang to deal with the occult, and it's kind of.
And then he goes all Liam Neeson punching wolves.
That's true. He does fist fight a wolf and win. But yeah, you see him. He's not afraid to get tactical, lose the cape, go definitely all in, and he does get bloodied a bit in this, but it's definitely well done.
So another nice thing Matt Wagner does is not just the Batman action scenes, but the Batcave stuff and the planning, or the early, not just technology, but more engineering, like figuring out, okay, I'm at A, how do I get to B, then C, then D, and seeing that stuff, but without like wasting any time, just showing you just what you need to see to move the story along.
Absolutely. And you do see a few hints of his relationship with Alfred, whereas, Alfred's not just a servant. He's obviously, family. and he's always there in the background. And he's his foil. He's the one that he talks to about these cases and says, I can't get my head around this. And he bounces ideas off of him. I like that. I've always enjoyed that type of relationship where, Alfred is definitely part of his detecting, his unraveling the mystery.
I love
So,
this spiky wall here, and like in some of those 40s, you did have death traps and such, and I mean a lot of tropes. But I feel like that panel is possibly riffing on the Adam West Batman there.
there have been some scenes like that, except I think the spikes were a bit rubbery in the 60s.
Yeah, a bit rubbery. But just the way he's put it, it does make me think of the Adam West Batman, even though it's just a serious horror story and all that. It makes you think, well, he didn't have to draw it exactly that way, and it does make me think of that show.
Yeah, the diabolical, pitfalls and traps that are set up throughout. It's fun. It's use of some classic tropes. He basically has to run the gauntlet just to get to where the Brotherhood is meeting. So
which did happen in the original story too. There was all sorts of stuff going on in that, but it's a lot shorter.
Yeah, but I like the way that it sets it up and shows that he's already beat up pretty well before he even gets to where he's trying to investigate.
Yeah, I love a good Batman gets beat up before he gets to the guy. It's maybe it's a bad example, but it's like playing a video game and you got to get through a level. Then I got to fight the boss at the end, but I'm all stuffed and I got no health and no lives. That's what happens.
Exactly. He definitely gets worn down a bit here, but as he does investigate, he realizes that the monk is more than meets the eye. And
I love this where he's just like he's got beaten up, he's punched the wolves, and he's not done too well, and he's half bleeding. He's like stuff it, just drives a vehicle through the wall.
Exactly. It's like he's used to, at this point in his career, punching his way through things, and he literally uses the Batmobile to punch through the castle and deal with.
Which seems, I don't know, kind of comical, but to me that's more like a military strategy. It's like, well, I can't punch a thing. I need like a tank or a tank equivalent to get through this obstacle.
Yeah, and he kind of uses the Batmobile as a battering ram, pardon the pun, but it works. It gets him where he needs to be. And, we start seeing his first uses of his technology and gadgetry in a tactical situation.
That's what I like is the tactical way his mind thinks, not so much the focus on the technology or the gadget. I mean, if all he had is a hammer, he's just going to crack someone with it where it's a knee rather than a skull, but he's going to use whatever he has in a tactical way.
Absolutely. And obviously, that's what he does here with the Batmobile. It's not just his transportation, it's part of his technique. And he puts it to good use. And I love the style of this one. It is somewhat modern. Oh, absolutely. You see some of the elements like the front battering ram is very much like what we saw with some of the early 40s Batmobiles, but it's got a touch of the 89 style. It's a little bit of everything in there, but
even the fins are a mix of the Burton Anton first one and that other 40s 50s one with the battering ram that also had some fins, but it was more like a regular roadster with stuff kind of kitted onto it.
Exactly. So again, well done, good art. And then we get to his actual confrontation with the monk, and
I love the classical weapons because they're in the castle too.
Oh yeah, I was just going to say he picks up what he has available, and these are things that are hanging on the castle wall, and they're practical, so it works.
I always confuse mace and flail. I think flail is the chain, and is mace the club.
I think that's correct. If it has a chain, it's a flail.
I hope so.
If it's solid,
both equally dead either way, but
certainly. So yeah, they definitely go to it, and we finds that the monk is no slouch when it comes to martial arts, and of course they end up on the top of the castle. You've got it raining, you've got the lightning, you've got the whole scene set up, and the final confrontation of our hero with the main villain. Very cinematography. It was very,
and it's noticeably darker. I mean, I assume it's nighttime or whatever, but it's noticeably darker than the other scenes to really play it up.
Oh yeah, and he's still at this point trying to get his head around the psychology of this guy. It's like trying to understand why are you doing this? What is
Yes.
what are you trying to gain from this? And he's like, it's what I do. It's power. It's who I am. And yeah, again, the love interest who ends up being a potential victim of the cult. He ends up rescuing her and uh, revealing that he knows her both as Bruce and the Bat. And that's something that's been, maybe overdone in some of the recent versions of Batman. But here it's done well. It made sense for the story. He's trying.
Yeah,
She's
and it was
terrified.
before they'd done that trope to death. Like there were very few people that ever knew who he was other than Alfred back in these days.
Right. And what was an interesting tie-in is this whole prophecy thing of, you have like this pictogram hieroglyphic type of
Hieroglyphogram.
yeah. It was something that apparently the monk saw the coming of the Bat as part of his great arc. He knew that this Bat villain in his mind was going to be something to try to thwart him. And so, Batman's coming to terms with the fact that he had been preordained to have this fight with the monk, which is kind of
I like, and it plays up like that kind of totem aspect too of like the Bat and elemental stuff.
Absolutely. And it causes Bruce to question. It's like, did I choose to be the Bat or did the Bat choose me?
I just go read some Grant Morrison stories and it'll break your head when you read his Batman stories.
Absolutely. Another one that really covers that mythos and the psychology of becoming the Bat was Darwin Cook's Ego.
Yeah, that was great. Love that. That's on the shelf next to me down there.
Yeah, and I kind of it reminded me of that when I was going through this. Again, very, very graphic, but well done. Very bloody, but in a way that it makes sense in the story. It shows he does have limitations he has to overcome. He's not just beat up for the sake of gore. It's part of the storyline.
It was realistic, like actual wounds and cuts and whatnot.
And I think that was really well done. Thank you, Johnny. We've gone through two of my favorite story arcs, the Mad Monk and the Monster Men. And for you kids at home, I recommend anything by Matt Wagner, especially his Batman stuff.
The Trinity is cool too if you like Superman and Wonder Woman. It's like the early, like first meeting of them in that continuity.
Absolutely, I'd recommend reading these first, and then you have a better idea of who the Bat is.
These are short reads too. They don't take long to read, but they're very satisfying. They don't waste your time. That's what I'm getting at.
Yeah. They're well worth your time. Great art, great storytelling, and they definitely give you a feel of that golden age Bat done in the best way.
Yes, like I wish there was more stories like that. I mean, we were talking before we started the show. We were talking in the 90s. There was a title called Legends of the Dark Knight, and that did a lot of kind of short stories that deal with different world cultures and mythic elements and sometimes dreams or demons and other supernatural stuff. And you just have an issue or two, and then it would be a new artist and a writer, and it would rotate, like watching Twilight Zone episode. It would just rotate through different stories each month. And that did a similar thing there, where it was just like more the archetypal elemental kind of stuff to the character. And then but other ones would get into like the personality, and he's stuck in a hospital going crazy and wonders, is he really Batman or something? He's had a schizophrenic break and something invented in his mind. But it's only 2 or 3 issues and then it's done. It doesn't like drag on for 12 months.
Right. They're very much standalone stories, and different artist teams, different writing teams would come through that. We may touch on some of those as well. So with this Beasties and Baddies series, like I said, we'll go into some of the more obscure or lesser known villains. Dr. Phosphorus is one that I'd like to touch on. He's one from some of the earlier 70s stories. The Floronic Man. Some people may or may not know who he is. We'll touch on him. Before there was Swamp Thing or Poison Ivy, there were other such entities out there, and Jason Woodrue is one that we'll cover. Hugo Strange we'll touch on again. I think we'll look for some good Hugo stories. Solomon Grundy's another good one who fits into the Beasties and Baddies category.
I'll tell you another obscure one.
Mm-hmm.
He doesn't appear to the 70s, but Lord Deathman is a very strange character.
He is.
He also pops up in the short story in the 70s, but also pops up in the Jiro Kawada Batmanga.
Yes, I love the take they had on him when the Batman of Japan has to deal with him as his arch enemy.
Yeah,
So,
it's just a real wacky, weird character. He had sort of one and done appearance in the 70s, and then he did appear decades later in some Grant Morrison stories because he was riffing on each of the decades stuff. But just even the name, it's very Japanese, like Lord Deathman.
Exactly. So thank you, Johnny, for putting this together. We'll put together some other series like this in the coming months, hopefully. And dealing with the time difference between Guatemala and Australia is a challenge, but we'll make it work. So thanks for watching, guys, and keep an eye out, and we'll let you know when we have more stuff like this in store for you. So if you like this sort of content, or if you have some other obscure Bat villains in mind, let us know in the comments. And that's it. We'll see what we can put together. So have a good one. We'll see you in the next episode.